to Getting Sketchy Live, brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com, featuring artists Matt Fussell and Ashley Hurst. And now, let's get sketchy.
Hello there, everyone. Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and welcome to Getting Sketchy Live here on YouTube. I'd like to welcome everybody wherever you are, even if you're watching this sometime in the future or you're watching the recorded version, of course. I'm glad to have you along with myself and my good friend and fellow artist and teacher, Ashley Hurst, who is going to be on the chopping block tonight. I shouldn't say chopping block. We're not going to be chopping you
I
up
feel
tonight.
like I'm going to be chopped. I don't mind telling you.
First of all, what is Getting Sketchy? Well, Getting Sketchy is where myself or Ashley tries to create a drawing within 45 minutes, which is really, really hard to do. So we have to loosen up and draw quickly. And we've kind of stacked up the mediums against ourselves over the last few weeks. We've been, we started with graphite and charcoal and kind of switched over to
It's getting harder and harder. We did a print and now we're starting to work in color, which just adds an entirely different variable to the 45-minute process. So we're going to see how things go, but it's definitely not a pencil sketch of a boat. If you remember the first image that we drew this season, this one's a little more complex.
Yep, so Ash is going to be using oil pastels tonight. He's going to be drawing a kitty cat. And if you want to follow along, I did put a link to the photo reference that he's working from. It's from Pixabay. There's a link in the description below this video. So if you look underneath the video in the description section, you can click on that link and it will take you over there and you can check out the photo reference for yourself. I'm also going to have the photo reference up beside the artwork too. So you don't necessarily have to follow that link. You can, just kind of follow along with the photo reference on the screen. Now, Getting Sketchy, of course, is brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com, where we have a wonderful membership program that includes video courses, weekly live lessons. In fact, when we're done here at about 7:30, we're going to go over to thevirtualinstructor.com. And at 8 o'clock, I'll continue on with the live lesson series that we're doing there. Now, the live lessons over there are a little bit slower. We do finished artwork from start to finish, and right now we're in a landscape painting using oils. We just started that one last week. Of course, that's only for members, but if you want to check out our program, there's a link in the description below. Everyone starts out with a free trial for a week, so you can go in and take a look at all of our courses and live lessons and so on. You can also check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free. There's a link in the description below. But of course, check out that stuff a little bit later because we're getting ready to get into the meat of tonight's broadcast. But before we do that, part of what we've been doing here for this season of Getting Sketchy is Ashley and I have been counting down our top 5 artists of all time. And last week was number 2 on my list. And this week we're going to be talking about Ashley's number 1. And Ashley, are you ready to reveal your number 1?
Yes, I am. And I kind of revealed it last week. Not really. I gave you guys a hint. I told you that it was another Spanish painter. I had already chosen Salvador Dali as an artist on my list. And many of you guessed Goya and some of you guessed Velázquez. And it is, in fact, Diego Velázquez. You are correct. Diego Velázquez was a Spanish painter, and he was the leading artist in the court of Philip IV. During the Spanish Golden Age of painting. He was an artist during the Baroque period, so they worked on often very dark or black canvases and painted towards the light. His early works are quite precise, but later on he did loosen up some and worked in a freer style with bold, sweeping brushstrokes. Besides numerous historical paintings, he also painted portraits of the Spanish royal family, but he also painted commoners and servants to the king, so he was pretty equitable for the 1600s, I would say. Finally, he also painted a masterpiece, Las Meninas, and I'm sure I've said that like an American, unfortunately, but it's a beautiful painting. But my favorite paintings by Diego Velázquez are Vulcan in his Forge and the Water Cellars of Seville. They're very brown. He painted with a limited palette, but it's amazing the variety he could get from those earth tones on his palette. So he was quite the master. Diego Velázquez, my number 1 artist.
So there you go. Here's a look at Ashley's top 5, and you can see that we started at MC Escher and worked our way up to Diego Velázquez. Now, next week I will be revealing my number one on the list, and I'm not going to give you any hints as to who that is. There's one artist, though, that we did say is on both of our lists. And if you've been keeping up with Getting Sketchy, then you know that there's not an artist that's on both of our lists yet that we have revealed. So maybe...
Well, that narrows it down to 5.
Maybe that's my number one. So we'll reveal that next week. And next week will be the last episode of Getting Sketchy for this season before anybody freaks out, because this has been really popular here on YouTube. So we're going to come back and do a season 3. We're going to take a few weeks off, though, because this is, it may not look like it, but it is very difficult to create a drawing in a short period of time on a live broadcast like this. So we need a little bit of a break.
We need a little bit of a recovery period, kind of like when you're working out with weights. You can only do it so many weeks before you start to break down your joints and ligaments. And I think we're starting to mentally break down a little bit. So we're going to have to recover some.
Yes, I'm always mentally breaking down. So just trying to figure out where that bottom point is. No, I'm just kidding. So next week will be the last episode of Getting Sketchy for this season. There is a season 1, believe it or not, that I just did by myself a couple of years back. And we'll kick back up with season 3 in a few weeks because I know that you guys really like it. So next week I will be doing the drawing, and I already know what I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using white charcoal on black paper. So that's what we'll be doing next week, and I hope you'll join us next week at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on YouTube. If you want a reminder, click on the link in the description below to get the 3 free course videos, because that will put you on our newsletter list, and I send out a reminder every Wednesday when we do the Getting Sketchy. And speaking of Getting Sketchy, you got your table set up. We're ready to go.
I think so, but we need to take a look at our materials first.
All right, so let's go ahead, and I'm going to switch this over and give Ashley full control of things here.
All right, so there you can see our adorable kitten in the top left corner of your screen. You'll notice it's not a very colorful picture. It's not in black and white, but it is a black and white cat with a lot of neutral colors around the cat. Now take a look at these oil pastels. Look how bright they are. This is a very limited set. Those of you that are going to follow along with me out there, you may have a lot more oil pastels with more midtones and duller colors, but I pretty much have a rainbow box for the most part. I do have a couple of browns and a black and a white and a gray. So there's plenty of neutrals in here to use to help me mix these bright colors down. But I'll go ahead and tell you, we're going to get a little bit Fauvist. We're going to get a little bit Henry Matisse tonight. So this picture will be more colorful than the reference. So if you take a look at the reference, of course, the cat, it's not my cat, but it looks almost exactly like my cat. I just couldn't get a great photo of my cat because he's uncooperative. But it's a black and white cat, and I want to get some color in there. So I'm going to think about the whites as being white, but also trying to get some warm color in there. And then the black in the cat, I'm going to try to get some cool blues in there, probably mix with the black. So the cat will be kind of a navy blue in areas where we can see him as black. So I'm not exactly sure. I'm probably going to use a lot of these colors, but I'm going to try to lean towards a secondary color scheme. So those are oranges, greens, and purples, and see where I can squeeze in some oranges. Orange is sort of our lighter color of the set of secondaries. So I'll be working with some oranges in the lighter values or the tints in the cat, and purples and greens in some of the midtones and darker, some of the darker values or shades that we see. Because we're working with oil pastels, it is a lot like painting, but we don't have a palette. Our paper, our support is our palette. So there's going to be a lot of color mixing on the paper. So I think I'm going to start with a pencil drawing, and very loose, just very quickly, a small pencil drawing, and I have a small pencil to go along with that small pencil drawing. And I have you may be wondering about the eraser blade. That's going to act like my eraser. To remove color, I'll just scrape it back down to the raw paper, and that way I can change colors. Incidentally, I've removed the eraser from this Blackwing pencil, and so it's got 2 flat edges, and I can actually use those to scrape my paper as well to erase out smaller areas. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe I won't make mistakes and have to do much scraping, but I doubt it. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started, and just understand that I'm going to be assigning those colors to values, trying to work, like I said, orange into the lights and blue and purple into the darks. You can use whatever colors you'd like to spice up your cat. They don't have to match mine. What's important is that we hit our values. As long as the lights, mediums, and darks are in the right place, we can really use or assign whatever color we want to those values, and it'll still look like a cat when we're done.
Meow, did you tell us what brand of oil pastels those are?
No, I didn't. These are Master's Touch oil pastels. So I believe they're carried at Hobby Lobby.
Yeah, or Michael's. It's
or
one
Michael's.
of those.
Maybe that's Michael's. It's one of the big box stores. So it's not a fancy pants set. It's not a square set of Sakura oil pastels, which are wonderful. These are actually really big and chunky. Bigger, larger really than what I'm used to working with. And my paper's a little smaller than what I'm used to working with. So I'll start out with a drawing. Then I'm going to make a mess of it and try to bring it back together in the end, maybe with a little tiny bit of accent marks and some outlining. That's the plan.
Okay, are you ready for me to start the timer, Meow, or do you want me to wait a little longer?
You can start, Meow.
Okay, I'll start the timer, Meow.
Here we go.
So we got 45 minutes up there.
All right. Now, I've already found the middle of my page just to help me get started because I've identified the eye on our left as being pretty close to that. I would normally start with an eye, but it just happens to be near the middle of the page. There we go. Something like that. And I'm going to start out with a sketch of some relatively straight lines. You know, when you're drawing animals, sometimes you have to introduce a little bit of extra structure in there, or just so that they don't look too much like stuffed animals. We don't want that.
Okay, while you're sketching things out, I'm going to go ahead and say hello to some of the folks in the chat box
that'd be
here.
great.
We've got, let's see, California, Minnesota, Indiana, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Arizona, Iowa, Cedar Rapids, New Jersey, Oakland, California, Oaktown, Australia, Algeria. Let's see, more from California, Georgia. I'm not going to do that again. There's a lot of fossils down in Georgia, by the way. Australia, Spain. It's so late. I bet it is so late.
Oh,
there.
my gosh.
Florida.
Thanks for being here.
Canada. Aloha from Hawaii. Colombia. Let's see here. Pakistan. Jackson, Mississippi. All right. Nuria, I think I'm pronouncing their name correctly, says, "Hi, Matt. Love your English. Very clear and easy to follow." I really appreciate that because I go back and I listen to these live broadcasts and I really feel like my English could be improved.
I've always thought your English could be improved.
Oh, well, thank you.
No, I'm just kidding.
When I'm doing voiceovers in the studio, I don't feel that way, but when I'm watching live broadcast again, I just feel like that my accent comes out, and
it just comes out.
Pat is following along closely. She is very, very closely hearing what we're saying. She's understanding that.
That's super.
Yes. Let's see. Okay. We've got a question. What is meant by value and tone?
Oh, okay. That's a great question. So value is the lightness or darkness of a color. So when I said that the lighter values, I'm going to try to use warm colors like orange. That just means white and the lighter grays that you see. Tone can refer to the intensity of color. So this is a pretty low intensity image. There's a lot of grays in there, and I'm going to pump up the tone or the intensity by interjecting more saturation into the colors that we see.
And tone and value can be kind of used interchangeably a lot of times.
Yeah, people use tone in all kinds of ways. That is definitely true.
Value is, as Ashley said, the darkness or lightness of a color, and it's really, really important because it's the way that we understand the form of objects based on the positioning of light and dark and middle values. And it's also how we understand texture, the light within the scene. Obviously, value is the most important element of art, and I'll argue with anybody about that.
No, it's true. Value makes all the other elements work. In fact, value should have a different name other than element of art because it's even more fundamental or more elemental.
All right. Hello from India, Hong Kong, Tennessee, San Antonio, whoop whoop, India, Greece, Michigan, Chester, United Kingdom, Poland, Germany, Granite City, Illinois. Let's see here. Christine asked, did you talk about the paper?
No, we didn't talk about the paper. It is black. You could probably tell there's a texture to it. It's a lot like a cold-pressed watercolor paper. Now, of course, except that it's black. Of course, you can follow along with any kind of paper. Oil pastels can look great on white or gray or blue paper.
Is that Mitant's paper?
No, it's not.
Okay.
In fact, I don't actually know the manufacturer of this paper.
Okay,
It's
so it's
very heavy. It's like 140. It literally is like 140-pound watercolor paper, but in black. All right, we're going to move to color pretty soon. I do need to check my proportions a little bit and finish sketching in the face and then see if any of these parts need to be moved around, and I believe they do.
Okay, Hosim says, does white charcoal need special paper or just normal black paper? I'll be using, I believe it's Artigan paper. It's black, and well, clearly it's black, but it's made by Strathmore, and I would spin around here and see if I can pick it up just to make sure that I'm telling you correctly, but I do think it's Artigan paper by Strathmore, and it's just the black paper. Let's see, Colorado, Denmark, people from all over. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Some people are up much later tonight than I will be.
Now, I noticed the cat has some rounded edges, but you've drawn it with some more angular lines.
Right. I've started out with very straight lines just so I can get as much geometry and structure in here, because it's going to be difficult to maintain that structure once I get to these big chunky oil pastels, which are just about there. And like I said before, I want to make the bone structure of the cat as clear as possible, like in the elbows and that kind of thing, just because it's so easy for a drawn animal, especially cats and dogs, to look like stuffed animals once we get farther into the drawing. So I have added a little bit of angularity to my lines, and this is how I usually like to start out anyway. Straight lines are simpler, and they help me to better analyze the subtle curves in the contour, believe it or not, even though I'm not drawing those curves. All right, so I think we need a little more paw over here.
Did you say a little bit of paw?
A little bit.
Ah!
Whoa!
So Christiana says, I have cheap oil pastels. Will they still work?
Oh, yes, that's what I'm using, are cheap oil pastels. I wanted to make sure I was using a set that was as no better than what you might be using out there. So it's limited colors. It's a pretty basic set. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And like I said, it may get a little crazy in here, and we may lose a little bit of this drawing. Actually, I want to make a change first.
And as
and
Ashley
then we'll just try to get it back at the end.
As Ashley begins to add color there, I just want to kind of follow up on what he said about the cheap oil pastels. I have some really expensive oil pastels, and I have some really cheap oil pastels too. And I find myself using both the expensive pastels and the cheap pastels in the same drawing, because the cheaper pastels are usually a little bit harder. They're a little bit more like crayons. And the more expensive oil pastels that I have are actually super soft. And in some cases, they're too soft. And while you're working up there, I'm going to move our little kitty over
Sure.
here.
I'm just going to lay down some really broad colors at first, and then start mixing into them and trying to create nice color variations in here and expressive color variations, but also do some modeling with lightness and darkness, but not at first. At first, it's going to feel relatively flat.
Okay, Jessime says she's watching from the Philippines, meow. And Robin Wall says it's 8:45 a.m. in Australia, meow.
Wow. Thanks for being with us tonight, or today, or in the afternoon, wherever you may find yourself. Now, I did put a lot of pencil in here at first. You can see it very clearly. You can actually see the pencil better probably on your screen than I can see it live. I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about that little bit of graphite mixing in too much. So I'm gonna lay down some black and white in our cat as though it's just shapes of black and white, and then we'll start mixing into it, kind of like the wet and to wet technique that you see a lot of oil painters use.
All right, let's see. Nuria asked, why did you choose black paper?
Well, I actually like the way the little black flecks look through the marks. I just feel like it adds a little bit of a little more variety than the white marks, and it feels more complete. If there's a little bit of black showing through, it just doesn't feel as unfinished as sometimes white paper. And I will use white paper with oil pastels, but most of the time I work on some kind of toned paper, even if it's light, like the color of sand. I still like a little bit of a value in the paper, so that my light marks or white marks stand out from the very beginning. Great question.
Okay, Halsum says, do you recommend trying to draw with oil pastels or just stay with normal color? I'm not really sure. Do you understand what he's asking there?
I'm not sure. Maybe normal color would be colored pencils because they're a little bit more common. I think that would be okay. You would use the colored pencils a little bit differently than probably the oil pastels. Maybe build them up a little more slowly. But I can't stress enough that I'm going to get a lot of color in here pretty soon. So if you're going to, whatever you're using, you might, if it's not oil pastels, which mixes and you can remove it very easily, then you might start out a little bit light so that you can layer colors into this as we go.
Let's see here.
You might notice too that I'm not putting the white down solid. Where I know I'm going to mix into it with some color like orange I mentioned before, I want to make sure some of that tooth remains and not go quite as heavy as maybe this one line that you can see going down the leg on our left, because that's going to eventually, that will actually remain a pretty bright highlight.
Chris says, I just started drawing recently and this channel has been a huge inspiration. Just wanted to say thanks. Thank you, Chris.
Oh yeah, that's great to know.
We've got several questions of what type or brands of paper do you recommend for oil pastels?
Oil pastels stick to everything. So I think they're a little more forgiving as far as your support or your paper choice than some other materials. I mean, I think you can draw, I've used oil pastels on cloth before, like an actual stretched canvas. So it's right now, it looks like a Boston Terrier. So we got to do something about that.
And, you know, I've found good success using oil pastels on any paper that's branded for pastels. So there's lots of different brands out there that make paper specifically for pastels that oil pastels are really nice to work on.
And you're talking about the dry pastel paper is suitable for oil pastel.
Right. It's also suitable for oil pastels because oil pastels are one of those mediums that's really dependent on layering. So you want to have a paper that has a pretty heavy tooth on it so that you can build up layers. On a smoother surface, you're not going to be able to build up as many layers of applications. So you're not going to get quite as much depth in the color. So, but if you're working on a textured surface, like the paper Ashley's working on, then you're going to be able to layer more applications, which is going to make your colors actually look more intricate. I guess just build up more depth in the color.
Mm-hmm. It'll hold on to more colors and so that you can mix them together right there on your paper. And we haven't done any mixing yet, but I promise we're going to. Hopefully you can see the black going down, but I'm going to put a lot of blue or purple into here.
And the brand he's using are Master's Loft oil pastels. So these are inexpensive oil pastels, and they're made by a big box art store. We're not really sure if it's Michael's.
I can't remember. I'll be honest, I took them from my son's room. So if you're watching right now, Roman, I will return them, I promise.
Okay, Karen says, what's the best way to preserve an oil pastel drawing?
That's a great question. The best way to preserve it is behind glass and matted so that the oil pastel drawing is not actually touching the glass. And then also, I have painted over my oil pastels with floor wax before. And maybe 2 or 3 layers of floor wax. You can put it in a spray bottle and spray it, and then smooth it out with a brush and build up a couple of layers of floor wax, and that'll really help too. Of course, the floor wax, I mean, it's not really permanent either, but it's kind of like a clear coat on a car. The floor wax might get scratched before the actual painting does or drawing. Good
And
question.
Jeannie says, I'm loving my membership. Thanks, Jeannie. Thanks for being a part of it.
Okay. Well, I see the timer over there. I haven't been paying much attention to it.
Yeah,
so.
you've got 30 minutes left.
Okay.
You're making good progress. I'll slide this
There we go.
little kitty over there and the timer back over here too.
Okay, I think it's time to start making some colors in here. So, like I said, I want to use some secondary colors, purple, orange, and green where I can. So I'm going to go ahead and start throwing some purple into that really light area that looks like it's maybe a reflection from a window on the floor to the left of our cat. And, of course, I will mix into this because it's too dark right now. So think about making a sandwich. We're going to make a lot of sandwiches now. We've got a base color, and then we're going to put a color in it, and then mix it in with probably our base color again, like black or white.
Okay, and Deb says, does this composition use the rule of thirds?
I don't think so. I don't think so. This is about the middle of the picture. So this head is just slightly to the right of the center.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you could make an argument that the body is generally in the bottom half. That's about as close as we get.
You're stretching it there, right?
Yeah, about as close as we get.
And your works don't always have to use the rule of thirds. I know that if you watch my critiques, I talk a lot about the rule of thirds. And that is just one compositional device. It doesn't mean that all of your compositions have to use the rule of third, just in case you're wondering. And Whirlwind asked, do pencil marks show through oil pastels on white paper?
Well, they will with lighter colors like yellow. You will probably see your pencil marks showing through the yellow. That's true. And if that bothers you, then make your drawing and then use your eraser to really lighten your drawing so you can just barely see it after that. Maybe that'll help. There's a light area right under our cat's arm where his value is reflecting into the shiny floor. So this will be where that value goes.
Okay, and Nuria says, do you use your fingers to spread the color around?
I probably will, yes. Not with other media, but I don't mind getting my fingers into oil pastels or oil paint sometimes, actually.
And some oil pastel manufacturers make colorless blenders, which are similar to the colorless blenders that we see with wax-based colored pencils. It's clearly not the same medium, but it does allow you to move some of the pastel around on the surface and do blending without having to get your fingers all nasty and dirty.
Yeah.
But you might be into that kind of thing.
We'll see how my hands turn out at the end of this. Right now, they're still pretty clean. All right.
Christina Adams says, quit meowing. My grandson will arf arf. We will stop meowing. Right, meow.
Per your request. Okay, I'm going to skip around for a while now. I've started using the orange and the purple a little bit. The cat's eyes are pretty yellow, but I'm going to start with orange. Maybe work some yellow in there because I want this to really lean towards a fauvist secondary color scheme.
And Big Blue, Mana, you know this one.
Let's see. I don't know where you're at. Big Blue, Minamiku.
Minamiku. It's so easy when I just repeat what you say.
It rolls right off the
It's
tongue.
all the letters that just get jumbled up in my left side of my brain. At the start, Ashley said he doesn't usually start with the eyes. As someone who has never taken an art class before joining the virtual instructor, I've always started with the eyes. Is this a bad habit I need to correct?
Well, I just want to make sure the eyes are going to end up where I want them before I work too much into a detail, and I would consider that kind of a detail. So there is a theory out there that you should, when you're working on like a human's portrait, is to actually shade the whole head before you really clearly define the eyes and nose and mouth and try to create the form of the head. And then usually it becomes obvious or more obvious where the features belong. That's just one approach.
Christiana says, you're like the 2020 Bob Ross.
Thanks.
All you need is a squirrel.
I would love my son to hear that because he watches Bob Ross on YouTube all the time.
Bob Ross.
He doesn't want to learn to draw from me. He loves Bob Ross.
You know, I had a little bit of an argument with the person we both knew who was my boss and who was our boss for a while over Bob Ross. And when you look at Bob Ross's artwork in up close or in person, it's very loose, obviously, because it's created in a short period of time.
Right. He's using invented texture marks to create the impression of trees, that kind of thing, I guess.
Right. And her argument was that he was, not a real artist, kind of, is what she was insinuating.
Yeah.
And I was, taking up for him because he has gotten, I don't know, millions of people. I don't know the number, how many people he's gotten involved in art. I grew up watching him, obviously.
Yeah, he got
very highly.
I remember being in art school, and anytime someone wanted to make fun of someone's art, they would throw Bob Ross in there somewhere, and it was just it was very snooty, and that's too bad. That was too bad because the art world is big enough for everybody.
On Bob Ross's show, his show was not about. It wasn't about creating masterworks to go in galleries and museums. It was about teaching people and bringing people into the world of creating art. And I think people miss that. The purpose of his art was not to, compete with Michelangelo and Leonardo. It was to
start teaching people about color,
to share,
and
the joy of creating with as many people as possible. And I think that is a very valid and very important endeavor, obviously.
I totally agree. In fact, I made my first oil painting with Bob Ross. I was 12.
Let's see here. Someone's asking if that's golden yellow. I assume that you used in the eyes and the
actually,
arms.
it's orange. And then I used a little bit of this, whatever you want to call this kind of color, peach.
Yeah.
Some people probably call it flesh. None of these flesh tones match me, but sometimes they're called those kind of things. Great question.
John says, I use a brush and Gamsol to blend.
Oh, yeah.
That definitely
That's
really
great.
works.
Now, I've heard of people using like baby oil to blend oil pastels. I've never done that myself. So again, I'm using purple and blues as my darks wherever I see darker colors. And of course, I can mix those in with black just so that they're not quite as bright if I want to mix them down. Okay, so we've got about 23 minutes left, and I've got at least some oil pastel in most places. I'm going to work a little bit more in the background, and then I start trying to mix more in and refine this and make it a little more solid looking. There's a lot of tooth showing through, and I don't want as much of that once we get towards the end. Now, there's a green area right in here behind the cat. There's some I guess some lens flares in there, and I think I'm going to mostly just ignore those lens flares. They could be a little challenging. They can come out with not a lot of time to work those lens flares. They could come out looking more like a bubble. I don't want my cat to look like he's
Meow,
underwater.
You said you were using a secondary color scheme, and I think we kind of went through that really quick. Mm-hmm. Do you want to explain to people what that?
Sure,
that
and
means?
it's pretty loose. I mean, I'm using a lot of the colors in my box. I'm not even really being that careful as to which ones I choose, but I want to make sure there's a lot of purple in here and a lot of orange. And I'm going to get more and more green in as we go. Those are our three secondary colors. And you can see that now. And you can see how great these colors look together. Green, orange, and purple. Of course, there's blue in the head, a lot of blue, and I'm going to get a little more purple in there. So it's eventually more like an indigo. So I'm thinking about the secondary colors and the colors around it. I'm going to use some red for some little accents around the mouth and nose. We got to clarify that area. And we're going to use some red or some pink type colors. And for some of these darker marks in the paws, I'll use colors that are analogous to the orange, which is also like red and red-orange.
And the secondary colors are colors that are made by mixing primary colors together. So
There you go. That's right. Thanks for saying that.
It's something that we know instinctively almost, but there might be some folks out there that don't know that. So if you mix yellow and blue, for example, you get green. You mix yellow and red, that's orange, and then red and blue, of course, make purple, and those are your secondary colors. And they're equal distant from each other on the color wheel, so they can kind of create a color triad there.
It's almost like using the whole color wheel, but still being able to leave colors out because you make it all the way around the color wheel. That's right.
Well, good night, Nuria. She says, good night and sweet dreams. Must go.
Oh.
You're fantastic. Love your fantastic lessons.
Good night. Have a good evening.
Is there a substitute if I don't have a white pastel? June asks.
The lightest pastel that you have would become your highlight. So it could be yellow mixed or that peach type color or cream color. You would just think of it as like a warm white. And I have had to do that before. Use like an off-white or a light gray, and I just end up with a slightly darker picture.
And Whirlwind says, how do you figure out that these are the colors you need?
Well, there's not really any color I need. There are values that I need, lights and darks, more so than specific colors. So there are kind of arbitrary. I've chosen to work with mostly. Well, I'm using all the colors, but I'm trying to just keep reminding myself to interject orange, green, and purple wherever I can, because that's the color scheme that I like, that I want to use. Picasso went through a blue period where he used a lot of blues and purples and grays in his artwork for expressive purposes. So if you like a different kind of color scheme, express yourself with it. You don't have to use these colors. You could use warm colors in the dark areas and cool colors in the light areas. Pretty much the very opposite of what I'm doing.
And Brent makes a good point here. He says Bob Ross has paintings in the Smithsonian. That would mean he is a real artist.
That's right. Good point.
And I love the way your cat's looking. It's starting to look electric.
He is.
I like the way you've positioned in some areas complements next to each other. We've got reds and greens next to each other and oranges and blues.
That's true. I want to be careful to say that I'm just thinking about secondary colors, but I'm not totally limited to them. I'm trying to use them all. Or all of the ones that I have available to me, I guess I should say. The green is kind of the in-between color. I'm going to use it where the lights and the darks meet in places. That's kind of my plan. All right, I need to work in the face a little bit. I put some stuff in there and I've left it out. I've got about 18 minutes left to go, so I'm going to slow down and work in this area some, and then just kind of work everywhere else in a whirlwind and continue to do so. I do need to get quite a bit darker in here. The shadow underneath the face is pretty important in defining that face. So I'm going to work down there a little bit.
So I just want to point out here something Ashley just did. He first had a lighter yellow green, and he put a mark down. And I think he realized that it was too light for that value. So he switched over to a darker green. And so those of you who are confused about picking of the colors, he's actually making choices based on the value of the color, as he just mentioned, and not necessarily the actual color, although he is trying to limit the palette down to secondary colors.
Right. So look at your set. You can think of the reds. I mean, red's pretty dark. It's a pretty dark color. But your blues and your purples are probably going to be your darkest values besides black. Speaking of which, I think I put some black down up here. Yeah, I'm going to mix a little more.
And Karen asks, is there a rule you use to tie all the colors together?
Well, it's that scheme I mentioned, and I may be getting a little bit away from it. But yes, it's choosing your colors based on their relationship. And so, as Matt mentioned before, these secondary colors are evenly distributed all the way around the color wheel. Complementary colors are directly across from one another on the color wheel. That would be another way to select and limit yourself and choose colors in an organized fashion. And if you think of the whole wheel, little groups that are really close together on any section around the color wheel. Those are called analogous colors, and that's a way to organize your color scheme also. The more different your colors are, the louder the artwork seems. And so this is kind of loud because I am using a lot of green, orange, and purple, which are in different places or kind of spread out on the color wheel. So it's going to feel pretty loud, pretty bright.
And Christiana says, is it as hard as it looks? I am 11 and I want to start doing more art.
Not at your age. It's a great age to start. And just like other skill-based pursuits, it does take some experience and time. So I think we mentioned it maybe last week, or I believe Matt did, that Picasso's dad was an art teacher. Didn't you say that last week or the week before? So
sure was.
He started when he was really young too. And that's the difference between me and Picasso. I did my first oil painting.
That's the only difference.
That's the only difference. That's right. I was 13 when I started to draw and paint. Picasso was about 2. So he got a little head start on us, but that doesn't make him better. It just means he got a head start. But you're young too, so you can get a head start as well.
And Christiana, I've told lots of stories about artists that are older that I've encountered that have, really put in some effort and really sought out instruction and heeded that instruction. And it really doesn't matter what age you start with, as long as you start with the right attitude. I think the attitude is the most important factor. If you're willing to learn and you're willing to practice and put in the hard work, there really is no limit to how far you can go. What I've noticed in the past, students who think they have all the answers or already know how to do everything or are not open to instruction, those students usually struggle. And also the ones who think that there's some magical there's just a collection of magical tips, and if they get all the tips, then all of a sudden their artwork will be miraculous, and that's not the case either. It does require work and practice, just like any other skill, and I like to compare it to an athletic sport like basketball. You have to have somebody show you how to dribble and shoot the ball, and after that you have to practice, of course, and the more you practice, the better and better you get. So I love those red purples on the mouth and the nose. That really pops with that little bit of an orange shadow there.
In here, that little bit of shadow. Yeah. All right, let's see. Need to work a little bit more up here in the ears. They really haven't been addressed much yet. So there's some light in this one. I'm using a gray right now, even though it may look kind of white.
Now, the gray is a neutral color, so it's not going to affect the color scheme.
Right. We can use black, white, and gray wherever we want to without disturbing our color schemes.
And Whirlwind says, I'm 28 and I just started during the pandemic. So you really can. I mean, it's very true. I've learned skills that, I didn't have when I was younger. I learned them as an adult. The thing is, as we grow older, we kind of start developing preconceived notions about things. We develop opinions about things. And a lot of us, unfortunately, have been taught as we grow older that a skill like art is something that you're born being able to do. And as we get older and older, many of us start believing that and think that those are skills that we can't do. In fact, I can't tell you how many adults I've talked to who said, man, I wish I could draw. I wish I could paint. And my response is always, well, you can.
Just get started.
And they're like, I'm not talented. I wasn't born with that talent.
I'll tell you what the real talent is. It's a thing called patience. That's the talent. It's not really a talent, but not everybody has developed it. So we have to continue to develop our patience, our stick-to-itiveness, I guess.
Yeah, that's very true. Some would call that grit.
Ooh, I like that.
I'm 59 and just starting. I'm 52, started painting during lockdown. I'm 41 and started during the pandemic too. Best decision ever? Absolutely. I hope there's hope for me. I started to learn at 72 years old. That was 3 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely, there's hope for you. this is what life is all about. You should never just, spend your early years in life allowing those early years to define the rest of your life.
We're not we're not who we are when we're 25. We're different. A different creature, I guess, every decade or so. We continue
every
to
day,
develop.
if we
every
wanted
day.
to.
There you go.
Life is full of possibilities, and it's up to us to, make the most out of those possibilities. Sitting around watching Netflix all day is no way to live your life.
Oh, I just had a long conversation, Roman, if you're listening. We just had a long conversation about that at home. So it was such a beautiful day, and a lot of kids are learning at home right now or in their rooms. And then just to go from the screen, and I know you guys are on screens, and I love screens too, but to go from the screen at work to the screen at play, it's just a lot of screen time. So just have to remind ourselves that we can entertain ourselves, and that's partly why we learn to dance or to sing.
Did you say dance?
Uh-oh.
Did you say dance?
He's got the moves. I like that.
Look at that cat getting down.
He don't know if he appreciates my drawing right now. I mean, he's
a little apprehensive.
I think he is. Oh, that's great. Love it. All right, let's see. Just a little bit of red up here.
We got a question. Can you blend it with a blending stone?
Yes, you can. You sure can. I'm using my fingers a little bit. And I also just like to stir it up. I just like to get a few layers in there and just stir it up. If for those of you that are Bob Marley fans, I like to stir it up with my oil pastels. So I just use the tip of the pastels and keep sandwiching those colors together.
Okay, SLB says, hi from New Mexico. I love that you feature oil pastels. It's such a fun medium. It really is.
It really is.
I'm a retired commercial artist, but only started fine art in my late 50s. It's never too late to have fun with art. And that's very true.
It is. Okay. See, I want to get a little bit of, I think I want a little bit of green
CPA and college
here.
professor all of my working life. This is Christina. Now heard of 15 goats, milking goats, and becoming an artist as well there.
Wow.
Well, you've probably got lots of reference material with all those goats.
I think goat was a suggestion for what to draw this week, so maybe another time.
Christiana says, why does that cat dance better than me? And Jeannie says, go Bob Marley. And I was thinking the same thing when you were talking about stir it up. I was thinking he's mispronouncing it. It's steer it up.
It's steer it up. I know. I'm sorry. I mispronounce a lot of things on this show, I'm afraid.
Bob says, I'm 72 and am a fledgling botanical illustrator.
Oh, that's super.
And Sniper Wiper says, with art, you will never stop learning. And that's true. I like to tell my students that it's a journey and that it's a journey that really doesn't have a final destination. You just keep working and walking forward, and each piece of artwork that you create is another step along that journey.
That's right. All right, let's see now.
Thank you, Anne. Anne says, thank you both for the art lessons, a wealth of information. Excellent teachers. Bye for now. Hope you have a great evening there, Anne.
All right, thank you.
Karen says, you're doing a beautiful job. And Kathy says, I'm loving this more and more with each stroke.
You know, and this is a real departure for me to work with these really bright colors. Being that Diego Velázquez is my favorite artist, and he does work with, I mean, he usually didn't even have blue on his palette. He usually just used black in place of blue, and his yellow was mostly yellow ochre, and his red was an Indian red. These are all pretty mute colors, so I'm a little bit outside of my comfort zone, but I'm really enjoying it. Let's see. We'll do a little bit of smearing and outlining at the end, just to try to pull this together a little bit.
And Kathy, what she said there, I'm loving this more and more with each stroke. That is something that's important to point out here, I think, is a lot of beginning artists, they'll start with a medium like oil pastels, a medium that requires a lot of layering. And they'll only put down one or two layers, and then they'll get frustrated and they'll stop working. And you have to keep going, especially with a medium like this, because your drawing develops. And the more you add to it, a lot of times, the better and better it gets. And this is a perfect example of it.
Yeah, we go through a lot of stages. I mean, it's a little uncomfortable to have, to have people watch you draw like teachers do in school. A lot of my own students are nervous about me coming around and seeing their drawing in unfinished stages. It could be a little bit nerve-wracking. But art develops. It doesn't just happen in an instant. So we have to give it a chance, and like I said, stick to it. I like to think about some of the best artworks I see happen in the classroom are from students that just don't give up. They relentlessly erase and fix mistakes, and if their paper gets too messy, then they'll use a light box and transfer their drawing to another piece of paper and just keep at it, keep relentlessly working on and fixing their mistakes.
Okay,
I
Ernest
need to
says
file my
here,
nails when I'm done.
can you use oil pastels on sanded papers? As we see a cat up there at the top sanding down its
Sanding or
nails.
sharp- Yeah, I think so. It would probably really eat those oil pastels up, but I'm sure you could.
Brent points out the blue highlights make the black look blacker. Love it.
And thank you. I'm probably talking about those little cyan highlights that we threw up there. I agree with that.
And Sniper
Let's
Wipers
see.
reminds you that you have 6 minutes left, but it's
Oh my gosh.
it's actually 5 minutes
Oh my gosh.
left. But you can go a little bit over.
It's a suggestion.
It's a suggestion.
The timer is just a suggestion, I believe. We established
move the kitty
that.
back over there for a second there.
So I'm mixing some brown and purple together for this really dark shape over here that's probably dividing a window and a door or something like that in our blurry background. The brown has red in it, and so does the purple, so they mix together pretty well. Some streaks out here, and I know we've got some streaks over here. We'll mix in a little bit.
Oh, yeah, that makes a difference, those lines down there. It makes those lighter values look like reflections now, a little more so.
All right, good. That's eventually what we're hoping for.
I really love the blue highlights.
Orange in
I
there.
really like those light blue highlights.
I do too. I love, for those of you that grew up reading comic books like I did, all the superheroes with black hair always have blue highlights.
Okay, Carol asked, are there any videos that cover animal proportions on the Virtual Instructor? We have a ton of lessons that feature animals, but not necessarily on the proportions of specific animals, because, the animal kingdom is so varied. But we do talk about making sure that you do accurately capture the subject that you're drawing, whether it's an animal or anything else, using several different devices. And what I mean by devices, I don't mean little contraptions. I mean like different approaches to ensuring accuracy. And Chris says, how often do you guys do Getting Sketchy? Is it a weekly thing? Yeah, it's a weekly thing. Next week will be our last episode for this season. This season actually is going to be a total of 11 episodes. You can go back on the YouTube channel and watch all our past episodes. And I'm slowly getting each one of the episodes on the blog over at the Virtual Instructor. And there you'll find kind of a written breakdown of the process, and the photo reference and the finished work and so on. But for now, you can watch them on YouTube. And of course, we'll start season 3 after a few weeks after this season ends. We'll bring it back, of course. It's a lot of fun for us to do too,
Oh, yeah.
Hey, whoever did the cat meow woke up my dog. Sorry, Melody.
Go to sleep.
Meow, I don't know who did it. Must have been
that meow.
Must have been the computer.
Okay, so we got a couple of minutes left.
2 minutes.
Let's see.
My dog's barking so much she hates cats. And to be honest with you guys, I had a cat before, and it was a bad kitty. It was really a bad cat. We got it from some guy. I mean, this was when I was in college, and I
probably
lived with 3 other
abused.
guys, and we got it from this strange man in the shopping center. I mean, it was really like
That is strange.
that movie, Gremlins.
Oh, yeah.
It was kind of like that to a certain degree. And this cat
I
was
bought this magical animal in the
bad.
parking lot and brought it home.
so bad. But now I'm allergic to cats, so I really cannot be around cats.
Yes, that's a good reason to not have to have a cat. You can say you're allergic to them. Well, I have cats, and I love cats, and I've always had black cats and white cats and gray cats, which is partly the reason I wanted to do a black and white cat. And unfortunately, both of the black cats that I've had, I love black cats, and neither one of them have made it to the end of their natural life. So there may be something unlucky about them after all, those poor things. So I'll rescue black cats because I know the deck's stacked against them.
Well, I think your drawing is an excellent example of there are more than one way. There's more than one way to skin a cat. So there's more than one way to draw a cat.
That was one
sure.
of my professor's favorite things to say about drawing. There's more than one way to skin a cat.
And
all right, so we got about 13 seconds. I guess we're just about there. So I think I got about 3-4 more hours to do work on this. But
Ernest says, "Can you use watercolors as an underpainting for this?"
yeah, sure you can.
Yeah, that's
a great idea. In fact, I've never done that.
Jeannie says, "I love getting sketchy. It's the highlight of my week. We'll miss you guys on your break. Well, we'll miss you too."
Yes, that's true.
Jeannie.
I enjoy being
We'll
here.
continue on with the live
Oh,
lessons.
oh,
So
do I have a highlight in the eye? Oh my goodness, time's up.
Pat says, "Matt, that's like buying a watch from a guy in a raincoat." Yeah, I know. And this guy, he was very charming. And me and one of my roommates, we worked in the shopping center. We actually worked at one of those big box art stores. And this guy would always come in, and he was very charming. He was a very interesting guy. And one day he came in and says, "I have some kittens." And he was a British guy, so he was like, "Oh, I've got some kittens. Would you guys like to?
You couldn't turn
would
him
you
down.
like to have a kitten? I'll give it to you for free." And we were like, "Yeah, of course." And that cat was bad from day one.
He knew that.
He must have known it.
He was setting you up somehow. All right. I guess that's about as far as we'll go today.
Melody's saying, "Don't forget the whiskers."
You're right.
Do you really need to add them though?
Oh no. Well, I did. I was. You might. I don't know if you could see it on camera. I was sharpening my white. Let's go ahead and throw a few of those in.
So he's sharpening
I'm
the
sharpening
oil
the
pastel
white
with
off the
the
camera.
blade.
Right. So it's got a little bit of an edge to it now. You might be able to
And
see.
Big Blue Minumaku, I didn't say that right. Love the cat and the colors, captured the expression perfectly. I agree.
Great. That's super.
Oh, yeah, you definitely did need to add those whiskers. That's a nice touch. Whirlwind says, "What kind of bad?" I'm talking about running around, climbing up curtains, breaking sculptures, throwing kitty litter everywhere, getting up on the countertops and knocking stuff over. I mean, this cat was like straight possessed.
Bad kitty.
Rocky says, "Very good job."
Oh, thank you, Rocky. Now, you know what? I didn't really work with texture. I wasn't really trying to make it look like it's furry. But right at the end, just dragging a little bit of one color into another where they meet, hopefully is enough to communicate to the viewer that, in fact, this cat is not hairless. It does have fur. Just a few marks like that.
Well, I really
All
like
right.
the finished result. It does look Fauvist.
Thank you. Thank you. I think.
Yeah.
I'm always on the fence about Matisse. Some days I'll love him, and some days I'm not so sure. I mean,
Well, I think you definitely were more true to proportions, and it definitely leans a little bit more towards realism.
Yeah, I
compared
would
to
agree
those. But
more
the
than
colors
Fauvism.
are really bright and really strong and electric. I think it looks like an electric kitty.
that's right.
love it.
An
I really
electric
do.
cat. All right. Well, that's the drawing for this week. I can't wait to see what Matt does next week on black paper. It's a little bit of a theme.
I can't wait either.
Since Velázquez was he can't wait to find out what he's going to do either.
Exactly.
And since Velázquez was my top artist, I guess it's only appropriate that I work on a dark surface a little bit, since that was kind of common in the 1600s. In fact, I love to paint with oil paint on brown and black surfaces.
Yeah, I think that black paper made all the difference in this particular drawing.
Yeah, I would suggest using mid-tone paper or darker when you work with oil pastels. And I really like toned paper with regular pastels as well, dry pastels. In fact, I feel like I used black paper already when we did the still life, the dueling. It wasn't dueling, but in tandem still lives that we did a number of weeks ago.
That was complex.
Yeah, it was. There was a lot going on the screen. So we've used black paper a few times during this season, and I would encourage you to maybe get a sketchbook of gray or black paper and see if you like to work on a surface darker than white if you haven't already.
All right, everybody is putting great comments in here. Love it, love this.
Electric cat, that's what it is.
Okay, Brent has guessed my artist, my number one. So I'm not gonna call it out, but you're right.
No
Brent.
one read Brent's comment.
Nobody read that capital thing there. Okay, we got a question. Do you name your drawings? If so, is this?
Well,
this is Electric
I thought
Cat
I would let Vonagami name my drawing Electric Cat.
Boy, you're so good at reading letters.
I'm so good at reading.
I don't know what is wrong with my brain, but letters and numbers just they look like a
it looked like
mess of shapes to
origami
me, yeah.
replaced with the word Von for the or. So
Well, of course.
origami,
Very
and I
good.
love origami.
I see that now.
It's one of my favorite forms of expression. And in fact, I've tried to make up my own origami forms, but I am not just smart enough. It's just not happening for me.
Julie names it Lightning.
Lightning? All right.
And then Kiz Daniel Vivo says, "Dang, nice job."
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm actually pretty happy with it. For 45 minutes. I think I like it.
Yeah, I like it. I think you did a good job.
Now, it's not my cat. But it looks a lot like my cat. So all I have to do is slightly modify the way the black looks under the eyes, and no one will ever know, and I can hang it up in my house.
All right. Well, I guess that is about it with one final meow. And we'll go ahead and switch over here. All right, thanks for joining us tonight. I definitely enjoyed watching Ashley go to work. I think he did a fantastic job, and I know you were a little apprehensive about using these colors beforehand, so you're pretty happy with how things turned out?
Yeah, I am. I've been actually, my nerves have increased as the day goes on, as we got closer and closer to go time, but it's kind of like being in a fight. Once you start, all those nerves goes away. I know you haven't been in fights, but I was a wrestler, and it's similar. So I promise I haven't been in a lot of fights either. But once you get started with your own artwork, sometimes the white paper can be intimidating. It can raise our anxiety level. Just start making marks. They don't have to be permanent. The first marks are never permanent. So, and the nerves will dissolve once you kind of get into your process.
All right. Well, thanks, Ashley. We're going to continue on over at thevirtualinstructor.com at 8 o'clock. That is just 27 minutes from now, and I'll be working on an oil painting here. We just started it last week, so if you want to join us, you can. There's a link in the description below. You can start your free trial right now if you want to. There's also a link to check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free. And we're going to continue on next week with Getting Sketchy, one final episode this season, and I'll be the one doing the drawing next week. So I look forward to seeing you guys right here next week. And with that, we're going to go ahead and sign out for this evening. Good night, everybody.
Good night.